Today we're going to be talking about factoring trinomials with a leading coefficient of 1. On Monday, we will talk about factoring coefficients when the leading coefficient is not 1, but for right now, we're only going to look at when it is 1. Now, when doing this, it's pretty simple. So if you have your polynomial in standard form. Remember, standard form is when you have your exponents in descending order. So your highest exponent needs to come first, then your next highest, and then your smallest exponent would be at the end. Your constant is usually at the end. So if you have it in standard form, you have your coefficient of your first term would be A, the coefficient of your second term would be B, and the coefficient of your third term would be C, all right? Now, the way that you're going to do this is you have your C value. You're going to find factors of your C value that add up to give you your B value, okay? Now, if B is positive, then that means that C would have to have either two factors that are positive or two factors that are negative. Now, let's look at this example. So if you look at this example, we have x squared plus 7x plus 10. Now, it is in standard form. We do have the exponents in descending order, so we know that we're good there. Now, if we look at our C value, the C value is 10. The B value is 7. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find factors of 10 that add up to give me 7. Now, if you look at this, you either have 1 and 10, or you have 2 and 5, okay? Now, one thing that they don't mention here is that they can either both be positive or they can both be negative. So if you have 1 and 10, that could also be -1 and -10. And down here, if you have 2 and 5, that could also be -2 and -5. All right? Now, since my middle value is positive, I'm obviously going to need the positive values, right? Because if I add two negative values, I'm going to end up with a negative. So I wouldn't use these in this case, right? Now, if I look at my factors, 1 and 10 add up to give me 11, 2 and 5 add up to give me 7. So then I would use these two factors, 2 and 5, as my factors, right? Because those add up to give me my B value 7. So the way you would write this is you would say x plus 2 times x plus 5. In other words, you're kind of splitting, in a sense, you're kind of splitting this x squared into an x and an x, and then you've got x plus 2 and x plus 5, which is what we found previously. If you wanted to check your work, you could. You could just simply FOIL or distribute, whatever you want to call it, and you should end up with your original polynomial, which is x squared plus 7x plus 10, which is what they did. Now, if we look at this example, notice that my middle term is negative and my C value here is positive. If I'm looking at my C value and it's positive, we know that positive C values are either going to have two factors that are positive or two factors that are negative, right? Because a negative times a negative adds up, gives you a positive, or a positive times a positive gives you also gives you a positive, right? But if you look at your B value, that's negative. So then that means that we're going to need to choose the C values, the factors of the C values that are negative, right? So if I look at the factors of 18, I have a -1 and -18. When you add that, you get -19. If you have the factors of -2 and -9, that's going to add up to give me -11. If we have -3 and -6, that's going to add up to give me -9. So then we would use this one because these two add up to -9, which is my B value, right? So then it would be x minus 3, that's my first one, and then x minus 6. All right, again, if you wanted to check your work, you could. Let's do some examples down here. So it says factor the trinomial by filling in the blanks below. For question 1, we have x squared plus 10x plus 16. We need factors of 16 that sum to 10, okay? So my C value is 16, my B value is 10. And since it's x squared, we already know we're just going to split that x value into my two factors. So now, if you notice, 16 is positive. That means I'm either going to have a 1 positive and 1 positive, or 1 negative and 1 negative, right? So the factors are either going to both be positive, or the factors are going to both be negative in order to give me that positive 16, right? So I need to find out which of those factors are going to add up to give me my B value 10. So I'm going to start off by doing 1 and 16. When you add that, you get 17. And then we've got 2 and 8. When you add that, you get 10. And then I've got 4 and 4. When you add that, you get 8. Now, obviously, it's not going to be 17. It's not going to be 8. This is my value that's going to give me my B value 10. So then I would use my factors 2 and 8. So I would do x plus 2 times x plus 8. And this would be my factored form. Looking at question 2, it says we have x squared minus 9x plus 20. We need factors of 20 that add up to give me negative 9. Now, 20 is a positive value, so we know that the factors are either both going to be positive or they're both going to be negative. Since my B value is negative, then that means we're going to have to use the negative factors of 20. So if we do this, we have negative 1 times negative 20, right? When you add that, you get negative 21. If you do negative 2 times negative 10, when you add that, you get negative 12. If you do negative 4 times negative 5, you get negative 9, which is the value that we need. We don't need any of these two. We're going to use this because they sum, those factors sum to give me my B value negative 9. So then my factors are going to be, I'm going to split the x. So my factors are going to be negative 4 and negative 5. Okay. I want you guys to pause this video and try questions 3 through 5. Okay, right now you guys should have tried questions 3 through 5. I'm going to go ahead and go over it with you. So if we do this, I'm going to start off by writing out my factors. I'm going to start off by splitting this x squared, so I have an x here and an x here. Then I'm going to ask myself, what factors of 12 are going to add up to give me my middle value 13? Now, because 12 is a positive value, we know that we're either going to have two factors that are positive or two factors that are negative. Now, if you look at my B value, it's positive. So then I know that I'm going to be using the positive factors. So if you think about it, the only factors of 12 that are going to add up to give me 13 are going to be 1 and 12. So 1 and 12 multiply to give me 12 and add to give me 13. So then this would be my final answer. Now if I look at this next one, I've got x squared plus 15x plus 50. I'm going to start off by splitting my x values, and then I'm going to look at my 50. I'm going to ask myself, what factors of 50 add up to give me 15? Now if you did that, you should have done 10 times 5, multiply to give me 50, and add to give me 15. Okay, if we look at question 5, I'm going to start off by writing out my factors. I'm going to split my x values. So then I've got x and x. And then I'm going to ask myself, what factors of 36 add up to give me negative 13? Now we know that 36 is a positive value, so we're either going to use two positives or two negative factors. Since my B value is negative, we know that we're going to be using the negative factors. The factors of 36 that add up to give me negative 13 are going to be negative 4 and negative 9. Negative 4 times negative 9 is 36. Negative 4 plus negative 9 is negative 13. Okay. Now, previously we looked at when the C value was positive. This time we're going to look at when the C value is negative. Now, if you have a negative value, think about it. The factors of a negative value, there's always going to be one factor that's negative and one factor that's positive, okay? Because if you have a negative value like 8, let's say, 8 is either going to be 1 times negative 8 or negative 8 or negative 1 times positive 8, right? So one of them has to be negative in order for your result or your product to be negative. So that's what I'm going to use. So then my answer here would be x minus 3 and x plus 6. All right, let's look at this next one. We've got all right, so for this next one, we have, I'm going to split my x and x. Now I'm looking at the factors of negative 14 that add up to give me negative 5. Since my b value is negative, the higher of the two is going to be negative. So if you think about it, the only factors that are going to work are 7 and 2, where 7 is negative and 2 is positive. That's going to add up to give me negative 5, and it's going to multiply to give me negative 14. If I look at question 10, I'm going to start by splitting my x values, and then I'm going to do negative 45. If I think about the factors of negative 45 that add up to give me positive 4, the only two that are going to work are 9 and 5, where 9 is my positive value and 5 is my negative value, because my b value is positive, so the higher of the two has to be positive. So this would be my final answer. Now, before you guys start, I do want to let you know that sometimes there are polynomials that are not factorable. If you cannot factor them using any method, then that means that it is called what we call prime. So if it's not factorable, if it's non-factorable, you would just say that it's prime. Sometimes you can't find factors that add up to give you your middle term. So in that case, it would be prime. Now, one thing that I didn't mention is that you always want to start by pulling out the GCF. If it doesn't have a GCF, which none of these did because the a value is 1, but like let's say that you had something like this. You had 2x squared plus 8x minus 90. In this case, I would start by pulling the GCF, which in this case would be 2, and then I would just end up with x squared plus 4x minus 45, which is actually what we got up here, right? So in this case, you would do 2 and then times x minus 5, x plus 9. So you always want to start by asking yourself, is there a GCF? If there is, pull that out first, and then continue using whichever method works best for that problem. All right, now that you are finished with this, go ahead and start on your assignment. Have a good day.